Why don't we start off with Common Grounds, if you could kind of explain what it is and what it does.
Okay. Common Ground is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. I started it in 2017. The goals are to basically make people aware that change begins with them, to make it clear to people that it's important for each of us to take part in the political process. And we try to encourage people to think about four things. One is staying informed about the issues that matter to them. The second is to try to listen when other people talk, as opposed to shutting down. The third is to try to take action in their own communities to improve things around them. And the fourth, and really the big goal, I think, is to encourage people to not vote on party lines or think on party lines, but to focus on supporting candidates who are committed to solving problems rather than scoring political points.
Common Ground, from what I've read, does propose solutions to some bigger problems. And I wouldn't necessarily, when you look at the broad scope of it, call it middle ground. There's a word that's come up like technocratic, whereas practical in nature. Would you say that it borders on that type of analysis?
I think pragmatic is a good word. Technocratic is a little a little sinister.
Yeah.
But pragmatic is good. I think that what I see, and I see this, anecdotally from people I know, but I also see it in the public opinion polls, is that people, average people, are not nearly as polarized as our leaders are. And I think that's the pragmatic point. If you can show over and over again that there's large majorities of people, not just Republican or Democrat, but Republicans and Democrats, who agree on a lot of steps that could be taken tomorrow, then why aren't we doing that tomorrow? Why aren't we doing it today?
What type of issue do you think fits best into that perspective?
It's across the board. We have worked with another group called Voice of the People, and they've pulled everything from healthcare to immigration to debt reduction to you name it. Policy after policy, but I'll give you one simple example. A simple one is Citizenship Path for Dreamers. The polls on that are off the charts. It's not just Democrats who want dreamers. Those are people who were brought here when they were young by their parents and have always known life in the U.S., no other life, to have a path to citizenship. Republicans want the same. In fact, in a Fox poll, Republicans favored a path to citizenship for dreamers 82%. So there are lots of issues out there on which Americans essentially agree. I mean, you can't get higher than 82%. And yet, it's been years, and we still don't have a bill that would provide a path to citizenship for dreamers.
You look at DC, you look at Albany, and while ideas and talking can get somewhere, a lot of it is power brokering. How have you, or are you trying to use Common Ground to influence actual decisions?
Yes. A lot of it is power brokering. A lot of the power systems are broken. There is really a pattern now in the U.S. in most districts where politicians choose their voters rather than the other way around. There's a lot of things that happen in Congress that really give the parties a role much greater than they deserve, certainly one that isn't provided for them in the Constitution or any other document. Controls over everything from committee assignments to appointments to appropriations. So those are things that we can work to address. The way to do it, though, is to really start with, I think, restoring trust between citizens and their leaders. Right now, if we have no trust whatsoever, if people believe that the system is rigged and that they have no part to play, then they will play no part. They won't vote, they won't engage in politics. If they do show up at a town hall meeting, they'll do it to yell at their representative. So one of the things I think we can promote is the notion that there are people out there, there are elected representatives who care what their voters think and will take that into consideration when they go to vote. And one of the activities that we're most deeply involved with right now is a citizen panel idea. The idea is that in each district, each congressional district across the country, a representative like Joe Morelli would say to his constituents, we'll select a random sample of people, We'll poll you on issues like immigration, healthcare, debt reduction, foreign policy, gun safety, right down the line. And I will take your views into consideration when I make those decisions. Not to say that the representative would not exercise any judgment on their own. Of course they would, but they would really take it into consideration and agree to meet periodically with people who were part of that citizen panel and discuss the results of the polls face to face.
This seems to cut across the grain of the reality that we face today. We look at what we see in DC, the divisiveness, and what's your response to those who say, this is pie in the sky stuff? Look at what we're dealing with right now.
We're dealing with a lot. I agree. But as I said, it's up to everybody to do something different. If we turn our backs on it, it'll keep going. I mean, things are the way they are because it benefits somebody. And unless enough people stand up and say, enough, then it'll stay that way.
Before 2017, you were a successful developer. You got a lot of reward through the altruism through the Kona Foundation. What prompted you to take this extra project on?
I actually started writing the book, Common Ground, as a kind of a personal project years ago. And it was after, I have 3 children, after my youngest went away to college, I sort of took stock and I thought, what are my kids' prospects in life? I mean, after they're out of the house, after they've gone to college and got jobs. And I realized that they're entering into a world a lot different than the one I entered into when I was getting started. Life today is a lot more toxic, it's a lot more hostile, and there is a lot less agreement and ability to get things done. So I thought, what is it that I could do to help? I want to do something to make things better. I started writing Common Ground, and that turned into the organization that we have today.
We see the development landscape in downtown. It seems to be the main focus of almost every mayoral administration. Where do you see it going right now? Because there is a lot happening.
Yes, there is. And one of the greatest ideas, and I don't know if the current mayor had it or a prior mayor, but one of the greatest ideas that anybody had was to fill in the inner loop. I mean, the inner loop was done probably in the 60s. It was a traffic engineer's dream at the time. And it created a moat around downtown Rochester. As soon as it was done, it was pretty much obsolete. It was very underutilized over the years. When it came time to repair it, I think the logical question was, why throw good money after bad? Maybe it was a mistake and we should fill it in and see if anything develops. At the very least, it would reknit the neighborhoods that used to exist, reknit all the street connections, and at the very best, it would provide incentives for people to come back downtown and build, and that's what's happened.
The gem of the Inner Loop project right now is, of course, what's happening around the Strong Museum of Play. Konar Properties is playing a big role in that. Talk about what your business is doing and what you see happening in that area.
What I see happening first and foremost is connection. When the neighborhood of play is done, there will be a direct connection between Chestnut Street and Union Street, and that large 22-acre block that also has Martin Luther King Park will have another access point, several access points. So I think that's critical. The second is that Strong will build a garage to house all of the additional visitors that they expect to get during and after their expansion. They'll build about 100,000 square feet extra onto the museum. They'll attract up to about 400,000 new visitors a year. And just to think really, even at their current numbers, at 550,000 a year, that's a lot. When they hit 950, there are museums in Washington, D.C. that don't get that many visitors a year. So Strong is a major attraction. It's a major driver of growth in the tourism business. And then beyond that, when they do expand, they'll start marketing in a larger driving radius. Right now, most visitors come from within a 2-hour drive. When they start really marketing in cities like Toronto, Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Philadelphia, they expect to get a lot more visitors from a 5-hour radius. Those people will want to stay in the region for a couple of days. They'll need a hotel, which is part of the project. We are providing some retail right across the street, which is part of the project. And then hopefully while they're here, they go down to the Finger Lakes and do other things as well. It has the potential to be a tremendous boost to our tourism business.
Mm-hmm. Going back to common ground for, I think, my last question, as we navigate this whole process going forward in DC right now, we're going to see the divide, I think the gap even widen. What would you recommend to someone who is not an ideologue on either side? How do they navigate this mentally? Because you've brought in speakers, you've heard from people who have dealt with mediation and compromise. What kind of message have you taken away to help guide you through this?
I can't really overestimate the importance of listening. A lot of times when I start to talk to someone and I sense that our political views are different, I take a step back. You know, if you're talking about Medicare or health care, you don't start off with Medicare for all. It's like, you know, holding up a red card in front of a charging bull. People take sides very quickly, but if you ask somebody what their experience is with the healthcare system, what they want out of the healthcare system, and what they'd like to see going forward, not in terms of a program or a policy, but just basic issues, it's a lot different. You know, when somebody asks me what my goal is for healthcare, I say, I don't necessarily have a principle or a policy in mind, but I believe healthcare is a public good. And what that means is that I believe it benefits me and everybody if everybody has insurance. Because honestly, who wants people in our society sick? Who wants to worry about the welfare of the people that they hire and who come to work every day? Don't we really all benefit if somebody's receiving good care? Everybody's receiving good care. Once I say that, and once somebody hears it, that diffuses a lot. And I think if people approached political discussions not as, you know, Republican versus Democrat or liberal versus conservative, if they just dropped the labels and talked about what people value and listened to what people value, it'd be a different conversation. And just to keep going, if I can, on that point, we all have essentially a set of values in common. You know, one basic value is the notion of justice or fairness. Another one might be respect for authority. Another one might be, you know, dedication to a community group or, you know, something larger than yourself, whether it's religion, community. We prioritize them differently. And you know, to talk to another person, you have to understand what they put first. You know, if you're talking to somebody who puts fairness above all else, they will have a different response and even a different perspective on facts presented than somebody who puts community first and who puts, you know, fitting in with the larger whole first. So I think those are things that are really important to understand when you talk to people.
So the Kona Foundation, I found its name isn't as big as some of the other foundations in the area, yet from what I understand, its work is rather expansive.
Yes, that is true. And that is pretty much in keeping with my mom and dad's wishes, and I think our whole family's wish. Name recognition isn't the point, results are the point. And as the saying goes, it's amazing what you can do as a team when nobody takes the credit. So I think that's really been our motto. And I think that also when we do work with people, with beneficiaries, people who are receiving grants, it's not really just the money. We do a lot of work in pre-K through 12 education, and we do have a full-time program director in that area. Her name's Marilyn Grant. She has a deep background, starting as a social studies teacher in this area. When Marilyn engages with the people who are getting grants, it's not as somebody who's handing them a check and saying, here you go. It's to say from the start to the end, and sometimes there really is no end, what are your goals? Who can you work with effectively? How do we measure success? How can I be of help? How can our foundation be of help? How can we connect you to other people who can be of help? That's a very, I think, good approach. It's a very useful, constructive approach, and it, I think, produces good results.
Is there an overarching mission that guides the foundation, would you say?
We have objectives. You know, we have focus areas. One is pre-K through 12 education. Another is supporting Jewish life. That was always a big part of Dad's life, and that's important. for us to continue. Another is offering better access to health care. And finally, we do a lot of work in the area of promoting tolerance through education programs and other programs that just try to limit the spread of hate and promote the spread of understanding.
And you and the foundation have done a lot of work with the Holocaust Museum as well
We
in
have.
DC.
Right, and that falls into the latter category, the category of teaching tolerance, I would say. The Holocaust Museum is, of course, a museum with a physical presence and traveling exhibits, but it's also the center of a lot of training that's done for people around the country. There are military officers, police officers, judges, law enforcement officials like district attorneys, tens of thousands of them who've been through training programs at the museum or outside the museum. The focus of all the programs is really the same. It's to bring in the civic nature of their public role and make sure that they understand the link between the two. The programs have been really effective and really influential. And when the museum first started, maybe a little over 25 years ago, I don't think anybody foresaw that, nor did they see the Center for Genocide Prevention or any of the other things that the museum does.